It's time for some collective wisdom, a podcast advancing the cannabis revolution, one conversation at a time. We all benefit from sharing knowledge and experiences. So if you want to learn about the business of cannabis from those in the trenches, you've come to the right place. Here's your host, Lisa Tollner, co-founder of SensiChew.
Welcome. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with John Saco and Spencer Andrews, both involved with March and Ash. John is the co-founder and COO, and Spencer is the public affairs director. A little bit about them. John has been in the cannabis industry since 2016, and he and his family originally had a chain of car washes, but his entrepreneurial spirit really took him into the cannabis space. He saw the vision. Spencer met John and Blake, the other co-founder, when they were working on their first license, and he understood that blending the dynamics of the private and government sectors and those processes were going to be very important, and he soon became their first employee. They now have 3 locations, one in Mission Valley, one in Imperial, one in Vista, and soon a 4th in the city of San Diego. With that, I'd like to welcome John and Spencer to Collective Wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. In looking at March and Ash and some of the media I've seen, you're being hailed as one of the most progressive and beautifully designed stores. And certainly creating a cool experience for the consumer when they walk in is one important piece. I think everyone can agree to that. But going beyond that, what's the customer service strategy and story for March and Ash?
So we always strive on knowledge and education. So our big thing is making sure all our concierges / bud tenders know what they're selling. When the customer walks in, we're all about what are their needs? What do they want? Give them the time. If they want to be in there for a minute and they already know what they want, cool. Don't pressure them to do anything else. But if they want to be in there for 30, 45 minutes and want to know every little product, we're there to facilitate that. And so I think we have a clean environment, a friendly staff. And again, it's just we don't push sales, we push education.
When customers get that kind of experience, you're taking that to the next level. You're educating them on how cannabis products are going to help improve their quality of life.
Well, yeah, and I think that it's important to note that the people that we have working down on the floor are incredibly passionate people, and they obviously have gotten into this industry for a reason. It's because they love cannabis, and there's some sort of personal story that cannabis has helped them overcome. But we have to keep in mind that we're not medical professionals either. And so when we emphasize to our employees, that when you're helping a customer, share your anecdotal experiences, share how this product has helped you personally. And that's sort of what I think customers appreciate, is that we're really honest with our sales tactics. Like John said, we never try and push sales. We're always trying to just educate people on what the best product is for them. And this is something that John and I say all the time. We're happier sending someone out the door with nothing rather than something that they might come to regret later. We're never trying to push a sale on someone. If they want to come in and talk to us for half an hour and leave empty-handed, that's perfectly fine with us.
It's nice to hear, because I speak with a lot of senior citizens in some of the work that we do up in NorCal, and many of them have expressed frustration where the bud tenders sell them really things that they get confused and they get home and look at their bag and say, good Lord, I just spent all this and I don't know what I was thinking, and I don't know what the bud tender was thinking, because this is really not going to work for me. So it's really great to hear. Now, how do your bud tenders get trained?
So before we open the store, all the vendors will be like a 2-week training where they come in for about 30 minutes to an hour, each vendor. They'll come educate them on their product, what's in there, what goes in there. And when we emphasize that is when the vendors come in, they come in and spend their time here for us. You ask questions, and you'll see our group. They're very engaged. They're asking a lot of questions. It's just don't be afraid. This is where you're going to get all your information. And it's like almost a classroom experience. Pretty fun because they're getting free samples. So it's a little fun classroom. But that's how we start the education before we open a store. And continuously, 4 or 5 days a week, we have 1 to 2 vendors a day come in to kind of do that continuous education, just in case something slipped, something new came in or whatever. They're here every day where we educate them on a daily basis.
March and Ash, it's not instantly obvious what that means, and I was sitting here thinking it could be a name, it could have a special meaning, and it always fascinates me how companies and their founders arrive at a name. So tell us a little bit about the origin.
So in 2016, when we first started this, it was kind of like, okay, we're going to do this, what should we call it? we just kind of threw something out there. It was Mission Valley. Let's call it Valley Greens. Then when it got closer, we decided like, hey, we need to stay away from having this kind of like marijuana name because we want to create a brand. And we teamed up with a company called Blue Yellow who did a lot of our initial engaging with marketing and developing and all that. And they said, hey, guys, why don't you guys use your last name? And we're like, we have kids and we don't want to really put our last names on there. And they kept insisting. And one of our founders, his name is Blake Marchand, and Blue Yellow insisted, like, come on, Marchand, that's a great name, Marchand. And then March came from Marchand, March and Ash. So March, again, is spring, it's growth, it's green. And then ash at the end it's fertilizer, it's rebirth. So that March and ash is like the growth and then the rebirth.
Yin and yang.
Yin and yang, exactly. So that's how the name came about.
It's supposed to make you think a little bit more than Valley Greens, which isn't very thought-provoking.
Or green anything.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of green crosses, I've often thought back from my agency days, and I had a naming division, did naming for companies all over the globe. And it always drove me nuts how they always would gravitate toward the familiar. And I understood that of just about the human nature of naming. But I can't help but think that once this goes federal and everyone's rushing to the Federal Trademark Office to get their patents or to get their trademark, just think of the green crosses of the world and green doors and green everything. There's going to be a terrible fight.
I think companies, when they first were entering, when the California industry was just beginning, they found it a little bit easier to get away with whatever name they thought of in a couple seconds. But as this market becomes more saturated, you really have to stand apart from the rest of the competition. And you have to create an experience and a brand that people will remember. And so that's sort of what we had in mind as well when we were coming up with the name.
And I think we took a chance by doing this because it's kind of like March and Ash. What is that? Is that a gallery? Is it a restaurant? No one knew what we were. But we had to do the right marketing, the right education and everything. So it kind of worked out really well for us.
In the naming branding world of my previous life, we used to call that empty vessel. So an empty vessel, you could make it whatever you want to make it. And in time, as you build those connections with your customer base, whoever they are, that empty vessel will be full of what you want it to be. You're not automatically setting an expectation or an impression. It's so empty vessel. Your collaboration with San Diego City College is really interesting, and you offer students a Business of Cannabis course, the only other course in California that I'm aware of that's done and really promoted is Oaksterdam out of Oakland, California, but it's obviously a standalone, whereas this is using a public education platform and network and making it available to any student who wants to learn more about cannabis and business inner workings of cannabis. So tell us a little bit about what your experience with that and how that came about.
So we were approached by the San Diego City College, the leadership in the business department, almost a year ago, and they were looking to sort of get into this space, and they saw that there was obviously a need on the educational front. There's a huge knowledge gap when it comes to people trying to enter this industry. There's not a formalized curriculum, as you know. So they were looking at ways that they could be innovative and work with us to create a course that's a primer to getting into the business of cannabis. Turned out that there was a huge amount of pushback on their side, and there was a lot of feet dragging. People were unsure about what this course really was going to provide. We helped facilitate a discussion in Sacramento on the state level involving the state treasurer's office, who ultimately was able to set some things in motion and get this class going. The class recently concluded. We had guest speakers that ranged from the unions, the UFCW. State Treasurer Fiona Ma came down and spoke. Assemblymember Todd Gloria came and spoke. Needless to say, it was incredibly well received by the leadership of San Diego City College, as well as the students that enrolled in the class. And there's now bigger and better future iterations that are being thought up at City College that are going to involve March and Ash, and we're really excited about that because we are trying to bridge that knowledge gap in the cannabis space.
How many students have gone through the program so far, do you know?
Our inaugural session was just held 35 kids, I believe.
I believe it was a full class.
It was full class. Yeah.
Okay. So that will be fascinating to see the results and the outcome.
It's fascinating. And I mean, there's concerns that are really interesting and unique. Like students were concerned that they might lose their student aid if they took this class. There's conflicts between federal and state law, obviously. And so March and Ash stepped up and said, look, we'll pay for the books, we'll pay for the course. We just want to get this course in motion. And I think that a lot of the fears that were prevalent before this course started have been sort of alleviated with how well it's gone. So we're excited to see where it goes.
Now, you mentioned there was a doctor who's involved with the initial launch of this program. Now, was he an instructor also?
He's an instructor, Dr. Leroy Brady. He's in
Brady.
the business department. And then the dean of the business school, Rose Lamaraglia, both had this vision for some time, and it took a lot of convincing.
So you're looking at not only the medical contributions and attributes of cannabis, but also the inner workings of running an operation of a business.
It was 100% about business.
It's really about business.
It was nothing about the products or nothing. It was about how to operate a cannabis business or how to start a cannabis business.
Okay, that's why the doctor component confused me a little bit, because I thought, okay, I don't necessarily think of doctors as business people, as entrepreneurs. I was thinking of him looking more at the cannabinoid side and research and so forth. But, I mean, obviously it's all come from that. That's where it all stemmed from, was the medical solution. So.
And I think that what he was trying to look at and trying to explore was all the non-plant touching opportunities that are in the cannabis industry. You know, when you think about getting into the cannabis industry, you think about, oh, am I going to become a bud tender? Am I going to become a delivery driver? No, there's marketing, there's accounting, there's legal, there's compliance, there's website development, there's
disposal. There's there's a long list of things that attribute to the cannabis industry. And we just look at three major functions: cultivation, manufacturing, making a brand, or retail. And there's probably 100 more that go attached to that are a lot easier to get into, especially now. So that's what we're trying to explain to these people. Like, hey, there's other opportunities to get into this, and we're just trying to address every single one and trying to help them. Because everybody there, all 35 kids, I don't think they took the class to get credits, if you ask me. I think they really were genuinely interested in getting into cannabis. So it was really helpful, I think, for every student in there.
Well, I think one thing that people don't realize is the ecosystem. This has, and already has incredible potential as an ecosystem because of what you just said. Everyone along the supply chain, even if they're not touching the plant in any form, but contributes an important service, it's vast. It's as vast as any other industry would be, where you need all those players involved to help the industry grow and provide value and make it work more efficiently. So with all the success you're having, it certainly is evident by how you run your stores, how your customers respond, the beautiful design of your stores. You're rolling out a fourth store. But there clearly have been challenges and hurdles along the way. This is not an easy industry. It's not for the faint of heart. Can you tell us about some of the hurdles you've had to overcome?
I think the first big hurdle that we did overcome, and I'd say a big hurdle, was banking. Banking was tough. When we had our third location, we still didn't have a bank. We were opening bank accounts with our personal names, trying to get that, but they'd be shut down. After the 90-day review period, I think Blake and I had probably over 5 accounts each shut down. We got, I think, because our reputation and everything's transparent with us. I mean, we're not trying to hide anything. We got approached by one of the larger banks in the world, and they're doing a so-called pilot program, and we got chosen. We were probably the first ones to be enrolled.
Congratulations.
And it's actually been the most phenomenal thing, the transition from cash to banking now. It's been really phenomenal. It's really streamlined our operation to make us that much better, that much more efficient, saved us time, saved us money. So I would say that was the first big hurdle. I mean, other hurdles is, like you said in the beginning, was there's many people that think you're in the cannabis industry that brings trucks or coming to your place every hour to pick up cash, and you're making money hands over fist. And we see that with contractors coming in trying to overbid us. Other employees probably thinking we're making a ton of money, and it's all false. Really, it's been a year and a half. It's been ups and downs. We're trying to grow, trying to be profitable. It's not overnight where you're profitable. It takes some time. So that aspect of everybody thinking we're just like a slot machine that pays out in every pull, it's false.
Along that line, we've had 2 years to get over the main compliance hurdles, and now everyone's rubber's hitting the road. So if you could go back 2 to 3 years, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
That's a tough question we didn't talk about before.
You didn't preface that one.
Sorry.
I'll just tell you this. I wouldn't change anything.
Okay.
If I was to do this all over again, I would not change anything. I think when you approach an emerging market like this, you're going to run into hurdles. And that's what makes you better and stronger, as long as you learn from that mistake. We've learned a lot. I think we've had a good head on us where we do the right thing. We don't step on anybody's toes. And we really think about our decisions that we make before we make them, and we live with them. They might be good decisions, they might be bad decisions. But overall, we just try not to step on anybody's toes. We'll never hurt anybody, and we'll just do what we think is right. So I don't think I would change anything.
Yeah, I think what John's referring to is sort of the application processes and how lengthy those can be and vicious with other competitors and trying to be operators. And when you look back on how long those processes were, like a year and a half in San Diego, just to get the permit, you think, wow, what could I have done better? But when you really think about it, this is such a new industry, and there's no way that you could predict the year and a half that we went through. And so really it's just learning from those experiences makes us even stronger.
Well, and now that you've been through it 3 times, you're becoming expert. So
4 times.
Now you're 4th time. And, kind of going back from that and getting little kernels from both what you've said, these culminating thoughts of doing it right, being transparent, treating people well, those are important concepts that not every dispensary owner believes in. I know from talking to dispensary owners and seeing how a lot of dispensaries operate and studying them, there's still a lot that live in a Prop 215 mentality. So they have their license, but they're really not looking at, what do I do to make this business really viable for the future? Look at the long term in terms of just employee interaction and training and support, and making sure your staff has everything they need so that they can do a good job and put on a really good face for you out to the consumers that walk in every day. And they sound like small, minute things, like no big deal, but a huge number of owners are absentee. And they get their license, they got it up and running, good enough. So the fact that you're really taking it that extra step. Spencer, talk a little bit about the importance of that bridge between government and the public sector and the private sector. You've had to have that strategic thought and have that as part of your game plan from day one.
Right. I think it harkens back to the stereotype that we were talking about and the stigma that's surrounded cannabis for so long. When these elected officials in these cities, Prop 64 might not have passed in their city, yet they're trying to do it to get ahead of Citizens Initiative or trying to beat out the black market. Whatever reason for getting into the cannabis market, it's usually a reluctant one, and they're not enthusiastic about jumping into regulating this industry. And we experienced that in the city of Imperial. It's really important to note that that's a conservative town. Their views on cannabis aren't progressive ones that we see around California. And so when they were jumping into regulating this ordinance, they wanted to find a partner that they could trust, that they could ask anything on a daily basis, that they could go and visit their store, that it would be a collaboration, a partnership, more so than like a client relationship. So in a city like that, it's incredibly important to work hand in hand with the elected officials and the city staff day in and day out to make sure that they're comfortable with what you're doing. And we've seen the fruits of that already. It was a contentious vote to get our permit in Imperial. I think it was a 3-2 vote.
It was a 3-2 vote.
Right, and
close.
It was close.
Like what Spencer said, you have to team up with the local officials, and we've done everything we said in our application. We've been community partners. We've reached out. We've held our hands out, and they realize other jurisdictions around them are turning recreational. And we went to a city council hearing yesterday, and they voted 4-1 to have the city move forward with amend the ordinance to be recreational so we can be competitive with the next markets that are happening in the surrounding cities. And I don't think we would have got that 4-1 vote if we were wrong on one thing, because it's a small community. They trust us. And that's why I think we got that vote. And just to clarify, that one no vote, he told us.
There's no change in his mind.
There's no changing his mind.
It would have been a no matter what.
Yeah, he loves us. He even says, he goes, but I'll never vote on anything cannabis.
Yeah, and some people are just very steadfast in their beliefs, and and that's fine, to each his own.
Right.
But you've clearly built trust, and that takes commitment, and it takes showing up and being there and educating and showing that you're going to be a worthy community partner.
Right.
So it's not like it just happens overnight. So cannabis industry, evolving, ever-changing. We've just come out of the compliance wormhole, and now it's 2020. What are your predictions for this year?
You're going to see a lot of brands kind of fold, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of them out there.
You think on a manufacturing side?
On the manufacturing cultivation side. So brands like flower brands, I think, will start falling down. Some manufacturing brands will fall down, like edible companies, pre-roll, any kind of companies like that are going to probably start folding.
From the cost of compliance, do you think? Or
I mean, we went to Hall of Flowers the first year. There's about 150 booths. We went the next year. There was probably 1,000. And so you can only do so many gummies. There's how many gummy companies? 50? I don't think all 50 can survive in California. It's just there's a lot out there. Everybody's cutthroat. I don't think the brands are making money just because they're trying to get into people's stores. And a lot of these operators are charging a shelving space fee. I mean, it's kind of sad to see, if you ask me. March and Ash, we don't charge shelving space. Really, we're in the cannabis industry. We're all together. You know, we're not trying to bankrupt companies by saying, pay us an enormous amount of money just to be on this corner shelf. To me, we're all partners in this together. We've all invested a lot of time and money in this together. I want to see everybody survive, but it seems like now there's just too many of them out there. It's just a monster of its own. So I think it's the year of the consolidation.
Especially when you look at the relative stagnation and growth of retail shops across the state. You have this proliferation of cultivation and manufacturing companies, and still only like 85 of the 480 cities in California have legalized retail sales in their city. So there's a bottleneck when it comes to where are we going to get this product out? And I think that people are finding that. I think that's going to become a big issue in 2020.
Well, and a lot of these manufacturers tend to be regional because the cost and effort to get statewide distribution is not as easy as everyone thinks. And I notice when I go into dispensaries in Southern California versus Northern, there are local brands that fill their shelves. And a few brands, some of the legacy brands like ours, for example, Sensi Chew's been able to extend, but we had good statewide coverage for 4 years before 2018.
Right.
So we had some history there that made that possible, but a lot of the newer brands don't. And getting that shelf space is difficult. But also as consolidation happens, that's going to open up space. And the brands that can hang in there, continue making good product, I think as the consolidation happens, they're going to be able to be steadfast, again, provide good support to their retail partners, and over time they'll be able to hold on to the shelf space they work for.
That's all we want here at March and Ash. We just want you guys to be good partners. Yeah, you can put stuff on our shelf and be there, but again, we need the continuous education. We need you educating the consumers. So if you don't have that widespread reach, then it's hard to survive, because we're going to do our best as a concierge just to say what about this product, but we still need that help from the manufacturers, from the cultivators to say, hey, let's do some more work with us. And that's all we ask for, is just give us the support that we need.
Yeah, we rely on them for the education piece. I mean, we have hundreds of products in there. We can't possibly be expected to know as much as the vendor knows about each of those products. So it's really important that they show us that support.
Well, John and Spencer, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights and your wisdom.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
That's this week's episode of the Collective Wisdom Podcast. Join us each week for another episode on OC Talk Radio, streaming on Thursdays at 3 p.m., and you can download Collective Wisdom wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to visit cacollectivewisdom.com or email us at collectivewisdompodcast@gmail.com to join the conversation. Thank you for listening.